much anticipated episode by Dr. Maddie McLeaster. Dr. McLeaster is an assistant professor of anthropology at Dartmouth College. She's an environmental archaeologist whose research deals with human environmental entanglements, especially related to plants and past agricultural practices. And today she's joining us to the most human of all entanglements, love and drugs. How to get into it, how to get out of it, how to make it last, and the drugs to make it all happen. She has a major collaborative field project with the Menominee tribe of Wisconsin and collaborates on additional projects in Michigan and coastal Maine. She is co-editor of a recent volume in the Archaeological Papers of the American Anthropological Association entitled Finding Fields, the Archaeology of Agricultural Landscapes, a theme we'll return to a bit. And her other publications have appeared in such journals as Science. The listener may recall our conversation about that paper in Science, American Antiquity, and Ethnobiology Letters. Recently, her article, All Plants Are Medicine, Historical Menominee Medicinal Plant Collection Practices, Wisconsin, USA, has recently appeared in Historical Archaeology. Welcome back, Maddie.
Yes, Hi.
Welcome. Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. This is a much anticipated episode because I think this is the only time that we've actually discussed an episode ahead of time and then actually delivered on it.
Yeah. We created an episode the last time we talked to you, and then actually held it in the calendar. That's a big win.
I didn't know that I could back out.
Listener, the audio may just shut off now, and this will be a record short episode from Gabe and I. We'll just talk for a little while.
Also,
afterwards.
Ken, this is not the first time we've been crushed by
I have more to do with my
it's that
the seriousness with which I take my New Brunswick archaeology podcast promises. That is,
it's okay, Maddie. Gabe and I are quite familiar with the sting of rejection. So
yes.
this is
after the show, we'll tell you about the night we both got rejected by the same person.
I'm happy that this will be the second night that you get rejected.
That's what they call foreshadowing, listener. So, Maddie, maybe we could start with your recent paper, All Plants Are Medicine. And so this maps an herbarium collection from the Menominee Reservation in Wisconsin that Huron Smith compiled in the 1920s. And along with the insights of his collaborators, especially John Satterley, I think is how you say his name. And what sort of plants did he collect? And maybe more importantly, what's unique about this collection?
So, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll start with kind of who Huron Smith was. And he was let me get it right. So let me get the paper open and just scroll down to that particular.
Accuracy is not what we require on this podcast. We can focus on narrative.
He was a curator at the Milwaukee Public Museum in the early 1900s, as you mentioned. He had a tragic death in the 30s. So really just worked for a pretty short time, but was really kind of an interesting character. So he was a botanist, but he also spoke, had learned to speak a variety of Indigenous languages. So including Menominee, obviously probably not super well, but nonetheless, so he includes Menominee names.
His tragic accident wasn't offending somebody in a bar when he said something he thought he was saying Menominee?
No, it was a car crash.
Oh, I see.
So he includes Indigenous names in his work, and I think that also it's interesting at the time, kind of his commitment to that level of collaboration when you think about the kinds of prejudices that would have been around at that time. So he works with at all the reservations in Wisconsin. So he does ethnobotanical studies with the Ojibwe, the Forest Potawatomi, the Ho-Chunk, the Meskwaki tribes as well. What's interesting about the Menominee in particular is that first, it's his earliest work. And so he collects more plants than he does with some of the other tribes. And then he also, the Menominee are on ancestral territory. So that's interesting from an archaeological perspective, because what that means is that this is emplaced knowledge. So that is being passed down. So through generations since time immemorial. So what you have is this plant collection spot, if you're a medicinal plant, or this is not just medicinal plants, this is any plant that's being used by the Menominee, this is where that plant is. And that's getting passed down and down and down through generations. So it's not just the use, it's the place. And so what he does is he goes to these places with his collaborators and collects plants that are used by the Menominee, largely for medicinal purposes, but also plants that have other uses. And he also collects plants that aren't used. And that's really interesting. And that brings up a whole suite of questions. Why collect plants that aren't used? He says he collects them because it might be that he said, well, I mean, the title kind of gives it away. All plants are medicine. That's a quote actually from my own collaborator, Jeff Greeno, who unfortunately has passed away. But it echoed something that he that Huron Smith documented working with the Ojibwe, which is that a very similar quote, like every plant is medicine or something like that. If not to you, then to somebody else. So someone else might know the usage. But also when we think about going to collect medicinal plants, he's going to these locations, maybe looking for a particular plant, either finding it or not finding it. Or he also, I think one thing to think about, he might be asked not to record the use of a particular plant, especially surrounding. There's a lot we can talk about. There's a lot of secrecy around medicinal plants. And so they might have said, like, we'd prefer if you don't write that down. Right? It's like, we're going to tell you, but which happens, with any collaboration, right? Like your listeners weren't on, we hit record after we told all our secrets.
Oh, speak for yourself. I'm an open book.
Emanuel also does a very good job of cleaning up our secrets in post-production. So you actually talked the protected information piece, I think, is really interesting. So you outline kind of this. It's not just sacred information and protected information. There's also this really kind of complicated way that information is passed on. So this in-place knowledge is only for a few people, but there's this really kind of intricate process of, like, you have to sort of buy your way into the information or kind of find your way into it rather than and earn your place and earn that knowledge rather than just sort of be given it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it might sound kind of foreign at first, but in the kind of trope of like making anthropology makes the strange familiar, the familiar strange. This is medicinal knowledge. Yeah, obviously, if you're a doctor, you go to school, you have this kind of secret knowledge that then people go to you and they're like, my arm hurts, and then you pay them lots of money and they tell you why your arm hurts, right? So
this is a Canadian podcast, Maddie.
In Canada, not yet. I mean, I'm in Alberta, so who knows? It could be next time. By the time this airs, I might be paying for my medicine. I don't know.
And I've just never been able to see a doctor.
Okay. Well, you have to go anyway. You have to go to somebody who has been paid by your tax dollars, presumably. So it's not that unfamiliar, right? Not everybody has this knowledge. So let's start there. Not everybody has this knowledge. There are people in the community who have this knowledge. And they carry with them a kind of power because of that, because people get sick and they seek them out. So right there, that's interesting when we think about kinds of egalitarian power dynamics, how those play out in the community. And we see this with Huron Smith, right? Like, he's not just going around asking anybody, right? What do you use? And there are some things everybody knows, right? Like, you have a headache, you don't go to the doctor, you just grab some Tylenol, right? And this is going to be true then as well. But then there are more specialized plants. One way that I think is the most interesting way that medicinal plants can be revealed is by dreams. So medicinal plants in this setting gain their power through their connection with the spiritual realm. And so the spiritual realm can visit you in a dream and tell you what the cures are. So that's one way it can happen. The other way can be passed down through families, through clans. And then another way, and I will say there's probably ways that Huron-Smith doesn't know of. There's probably ways that I don't know of. Of course, if you're Huron-Smith, you can also just ask. But the other way is to join a medicinal society. And that requires fees to join. Any type of tutelage requires a fee for each plant and the accompanying song that goes with the plant. And so it's not just the plant. And it's also the plants have to be collected during certain times of year, in certain places. All of that gets kind of grouped together. And each recitation of the song requires a fee as well. And that's not because kind of in our capitalist world, we're like, oh, people just want their money, right? It's actually tied to the plant. It's kind of valuing the plant. And valuing the medicine. So it does not work if it is not valued. And if you're not kind of taking it seriously. And so, the monetary, or trade, or, it doesn't have to be, just money kind of as we think of it, but some type of bargain has to be struck to show that it's being valued. And those are the ways that you can gain medicinal knowledge.
This is good. We're going to return to asking for it from you we'll talk about compensation later. Which we forgot, right? I guess.
None of these cures are going to work because I'm doing this for free.
Exactly.
And were the societies both men and women, or was it mostly men or mostly women? It probably depended on the group, right?
Yeah, so I believe the majority of the kind of so you have a kind of record problem here,
right?
Or a recording problem. The majority of the societies that I can think of, the secretive ones, and the medicinal ones were men. However, ethnographers are men, so right. There's no way, no chance that they would have been given any type of access to a women's medicinal society. So that might, and some of his informants are women. So obviously they have access to medicinal knowledge. How they're gaining that isn't clear to me. But this is, people who delve into this literature deeper than I have, may have more knowledge as how that gets passed along.
So you've pointed to a lot of the challenges inherent in studying things that are secret, instead of necessarily complicated.
Yeah.
But you actually you found out quite a bit about menominee, mobility, and landscape knowledge through this study. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. So, there are real challenges in studying secret things and medicinal plants in particular. And I don't know if we're going to get into why they're a challenge in the archaeological record. Yeah. Is that coming?
Yes. That's
okay.
Next.
Then I won't bother.
We're laying the foundation here. That's
okay. So what we learned from the landscape. So there's different ways to kind of approach. So he has 377 herbarium specimens. And there's a lot of ways that scholars have looked at medicinal plants, mostly to look at their use. But in conversations with my dissertation member, Mark Lysat, he was like, well, maybe you can map them. And I was like, oh, that's so good. That's such a smart idea. So I want to give him credit. And what mapping them does is kind of moves us away from usage, because when we find them in the archaeological record, we don't know, are these being used? Are they not? And we can talk about some of the challenges there. But what this does is it allows us to see where people are moving, where not people, everybody, but where the healers are moving to collect these plants. And that gives us a sense. So now it's the time period that Huron Smith is doing this is the 1920s. There's the Menominee Reservation is established in 1854. So even though the reservation is on ancestral territory, it is a very small fraction of that ancestral territory. So right from the get-go, we can think about two ways that this movement enters. One, we can use it archaeologically to think about kind of foraging areas and areas that are in the community's, ability to monitor. Right? Because we're talking about plants that only ripen. What part of the plant are you looking for? If you're looking for the flower, that might only be there for a couple days. And so that's going to require monitoring. If you're looking for seeds, you don't want them to fall off the plant, things like this. If you're looking for like the first shoot, right? So you have to have a really strong sense of monitoring, which means that these landscapes have to be kind of in your monitoring space, in your active spaces. So what does that look like for foraging? We have a better sense of that, I think, for hunting. I think there's a little bit of a gender dynamic there in a priority.
I just hold up the picture that Lou Binford put in that article, and I figure I'm getting more or less solved.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to kind of prioritize male activities.
It was flipping through here for a diagram that explained this, and I just...
So right there, right? So we can say what kinds of what's our foraging areas? What's our plant collection zones? The other way we can think about this is the ways that the Menominee maintain that landscape knowledge, despite, like 75 years of, it no longer being of that restricted access that the reservation brings. And in both cases, it was wild. So what we find, and you can read the article, is that the vast majority of plants are collected close to home. So that medicinal plants tend to be, there's a whole suite of them that are right around. However, some of them are quite far away. And Huron Smith and his collaborators go quite far. And I will say that this space that he goes to with John Satterley, he goes to so John Satterley also knows other spaces that he writes letters about, particularly you mentioned the science podcast that I did. 60 Islands is another ancestral territory that the Menominee still go to.
Oh, interesting.
So this this space could even be bigger. So just looking at a really tight polygon, drawing like a big circle. It's not a circle. A circle would make it even bigger. Just kind of connecting all the dots of these points. We're at 9 times the foraging areas that archaeologists typically use in this region. So what's that? What that tells us is that people are moving around and are managing landscapes and have them in their kind of cultural purview vastly more than what we've given them credit for. And then it also shows us that despite the reservation area, people are still, 75 years later, still like, oh, I know exactly where that plant is. Let's go. Hop in. We're driving.
So you're telling me they're growing drugs in raised beds all over the Upper Peninsula?
Well, it introduces a kind of an interesting archaeological patterning thing too, right? Because if you're spending so much time in the landscape and you're covering such a big area and you're, waiting for these first buds to come out or these flowers to come out, it means that you're probably staying overnight or for a couple of nights or for a few days in these particular locations where these plants are. And so, there's a whole archaeology here that we may be missing, not thinking about kind of going to specific, like these don't fit within traditional archaeological models of how we think about forager space, right?
Yeah. I mean, the only time, the signatures are going to be so faint, right? Because it's not like, let's say, quarry or something, or a space where you might be working a tool, right? I mean, these are just kind of camping, waiting to see, and again, the people who are doing this are going to have a really strong landscape knowledge. So they're going to be able to know, like, okay, this is the temperature right now, this is what's coming up around me, which means that if I want that medicinal plant, I better. But yeah, you're right. If you're looking for a part of the plant that's only going to be let's say ripe for a short window, you are probably going up there and spending some time. The only plant I can think of that that's collected that produces a strong archaeological signature of the kind of processing of it, along the Kankakee River, there are a number of water lily processing sites. And those are recognizable because the water lilies require the processing of them. So people go there, Native American communities will go there, and then they require these kind of big earth ovens to process. And so we as archaeologists can find those earth ovens. Because they go when they're ready to be collected, they process a ton of them, and then they bring them back to their main villages. And then, of course, maple sugaring camps also probably have, some signatures. And that might be something that your Canadian listeners are like, aha, yes,
So
maple sugaring.
so it's funny. We had a conversation with Jess Robinson in the fall, and we're scheming. We should probably actually get this figured out, Gabe, to do maybe a spring Sugarbush archaeology episode.
Sugarbush Archaeology is actually the name I almost used for this Valentine's Day themed podcast. But you talked about, Maddie, some of the reasons archaeologically that studying medicinal plants is difficult. But what are why is it hard to study these?
Yeah. So, well, I mentioned all plants are medicine.
Yeah.
Right. So right from the
that
title.
makes it easy, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah. You can just write medicinal.
You're never wrong. That's yeah.
You see challenge, I see opportunity.
So, anytime you have so for your listeners who aren't familiar, we find plants in the archaeological record by doing largely through a process called, now we're talking individual species. And so to do that, our best strategy is to do macrobotanical analysis. And what that means is that we take some sediment from an archaeological site, or even better, from a particular feature of an archaeological site. We do something called floating it, which we put it in water. It gets agitated. The charred material floats to the top. If it's not charred, it probably doesn't preserve in the first place because seeds grow and things like that. That floating material is siphoned off in some way, depending on the method you use. And then it is the seeds and the charcoal are identified. And if it's a seed, we can get it typically down to species. And the species piece is going to be important. So there's other methods we can use in archaeobotanical analysis that can get us to types or to genus. But for medicinal plants in particular, you do need species because there's quite a variety. So with medicinal plants, well, first you have the hurdle of, is that part of the plant going to preserve archaeologically? So if it's the leaf that's curative, no, right? So it's not going to preserve. So that's hurdle one. Except in and there are fantastic contexts, right? Like a cave where not in this part of the world that I'm aware of, but a cave where someone's buried with all kinds of plant material that's preserved for thousands of years. Outside of that, the answer is no.
Well, we know what drugs Otzi had, or however you say it.
Right?
Yeah.
It's true. So, and then you have, well, why would they be charred? So let's say it is the seed. Well, why would the seeds be charred in the first place? Are you eating them? So that's another. Like, most of the finds we have are it would be most of the finds are accidental charring outside from like when a house burns down or something like that. So again, the charring why would it enter is another issue. And then, of course, you have what is a medicinal plant. So when we think about medicinal plants in this context, it's important to note that we're not just talking about like a headache or a broken arm or things like this. We're talking about plants that also have like a spiritual, can have spiritual quality or curative qualities. It can also be like something for luck. It can be something for love, right? So there's a hunter's charm, right? So there's a whole suite of things that fall under medicine. Mary Simon has this, and I don't know if it's hers or if she's citing it, but she has this article on magic plants, which is a nice kind of way to translate the idea of medicine. I think in some capacity, it loses a little bit.
I had a grad student get nabbed at the border with magic plants once.
yeah. But so the other issue then is how do we identify what counts as a medicinal plant? So we don't necessarily know. We'll find a thing that we think is a weed seed, right? And we won't know, is it medicinal or not? So I'll just give you, and then there's plants that have overlapping categories. So there's plants that we find that are food plants that could also have been used for medicinal properties. So I wrote down hazelnut, which the inner bark of a hazel bush can be used with other herbs to cement all the properties together. So it's like a binding to kind of amplify, like to make them all work together. And you can also use it to expel worms, not the inner bark. That's the prickles on the burrs can help you expel worms. So
We'd like to chime in here and say that none of this should be construed as real medical advice in the New Brunswick Archaeology podcast.
No, I mean, there's what's the RFK there in the States could use some of this worm expelling medicine, couldn't he?
Possibly.
That is true. Yeah. It does say eclectics have used, so I don't know what he means by that. These are, yes, I should say that, these don't work without the accompanying song and things like this. You would just be potentially making yourself uncomfortable, especially if you're eating the prickles on the burrs.
Yeah, I go for the Nutella part of the hazelnut. Is my
yeah.
But anyway, point being, right? We find hazelnut at an archaeological site. We as archaeologists find hazelnut at the archaeological site, and we would say, "Oh, this is for eating, right? This is food." Without considering these other properties. And so that's one big challenge with medicinal plants. So we have either we don't recognize them as medicinal because there's no records, right? Like Huron Smith worked for 3 weeks with the Menominee, with 3 healers in the Menominee, and he says all plants are medicine, right? So this is so we have this one issue where we don't know if it's used as medicine. Then we have this second issue where we might interpret it as not medicine when in fact it was used as medicine. And then you just have the normal archaeological suite of things that, preservation issues. As a result, medicinal plants are really just kind of get marginalized in reports, and we don't see a real engagement with them as a category. And this article was kind of a way to be like, okay, maybe we don't know the use of these plants, but can we use these plants in other ways to get something valuable? In this case, we actually do know the use, but we do know the use because that's why he collected them. But it was like, can we use plants in other ways to get information away from use? Because use is really problematic. And and as a result, we see these healers going quite far.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So we're it's Valentine's Day, and we're thinking about we're going to focus on the good medicine here, and in particular, so.
Although I don't know, Ken, is it possible we should drop this the night before in case anyone needs to get out of love? I'm told that we're going to get some of those.
I think this is actually going to come out on Friday the 13th. So, that's it's going to be, there's going to be all these we might need the good medicine to counteract the darker elements of this Friday the 13th. But
and Emanuel, this is where you can put the baseline.
Yes, yeah. So so you talked about love potions in particular, and so can you tell us about some of these love potions from the Midwest and how love potions and this idea of kind of bringing in love or relationships that factors into medicinal plants in the ethnographic or archaeological record?
Yeah. So I will say, you mentioned that these are like good medicine. I'd be very careful, just to your listeners, with any type of love medicine. It doesn't end well. I mean, is it good? I mean,
I saw in the ad that if it doesn't end, you should definitely go to the emergency room.
I was going to say, it's good while it lasted, and then, that...
So some of them, I guess, are, I don't know. All right, well, there's multiple. So I'll start with saying there's one thing I really enjoyed in this process, prepping for this podcast, was just how many kinds of love potions, as we'll kind of label them, love charms, there are. Things I hadn't thought of, which is really fun. Like, for instance, I never thought about making a prostitute love me and only me. That hasn't been on my list. That's not from the Midwest. I'd like to start there. It's something from Greece, but
I thought it was, but like Chicago.
I did. Okay, this is an aside, but I once drove past a hotel advertising nap rates in Chicago on their, sign out front, and I thought, and my mom.
You're entering classy when the rates drop down to by the minute. That's
yeah. My mom, she told me she didn't think it was for naps, and I was like, thanks. Just in case I in my college days hadn't put that together.
Yeah.
Still so young and innocent. Although I did often wonder if someone came in and was like, I'd like a nap.
Yeah. I
like,
don't think this is the right place for you. This is not what we're actually advertising here.
All right. Well, anyway. So there's lots of kinds of love potions. And probably the one that you think of, or love charms, the one that kind of comes up front of mind is going to be what the early 20th century ethnographers called a bagger, which I thought was a nice, unsubtle way of saying,
hardly know her.
So it's to kind of bag the object of your affection. But there's a lot of other love potions for like fidelity, ending quarrels, obviously the ones that you both alluded to, even though neither one of you has ever disappointed a woman, which was to make yourself a more robust lover. And of course, aphrodisiacs is another category. They take lots of different forms. So plants, obviously, that's what we're talking about. But it might be a tincture that you eat or drink. And you can also use puppets in a variety of ways. We're thinking about like a voodoo doll kind of scenario.
Can you walk us through puppets a little bit?
The puppet story is a dark one. If we want to start with plants and make our way to puppets.
Okay, we'll trust your judgment on what order we take these.
Yeah. Well, let's start with plants. We'll save the puppets to keep your listener listening.
And so are these a combination of sort of self-administered, but also maybe like surreptitiously, like giving the concoction to your prospective lover? Is that the idea? Is that
it's what you want to happen, right? So in the case of a bagger, we'll start with some plants from the Midwest. So I wrote a note. Don't try this at home.
Well, maybe have a disclaimer on the screen as well for if this goes out on social media. I mean, this could really put us viral, Gabe. That we poisoned a whole bunch of people in North America.
So I want to start.
Listener, don't go viral either. If these things are effective, be careful out there.
Yeah, so
this could be more dangerous than viruses. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to start by saying that you're dealing with a potential translation issue. This is reported by a white man in the 20s. There's lots of good reason his Menominee collaborators may have lied to him.
Yeah, I believe the line that I highlighted a line: "No white man will ever get all the data, names, and uses of plants" from
That's
Harlan
right.
Smith himself. So
Yeah. So Huron Smith. Yeah.
Huron Smith. Yeah.
But so some things to note. As we kind of mentioned already, they're not just something you just use, right? They have to be collected at certain times. There are songs that accompany them. So there's particular medicine men and women that you would go to for this. So if you want to find one of them, that would be my advice. Don't do it on your own. Also, I will say, like, some of this medicine is quite powerful. We're going to talk about the puppets. Also, so here's one from the Ojibwe in 1861, reported by Walter James Hoffman, that Reverend Peter Jones actually documented. So this is in the 1860s. So we're moving away from Huron Smith, and he describes a mix of roots and red ochre that's painted onto the face, and it makes the individual irresistible to the object of their affection. However, when the medicine, so this would be a bagger, right? I mean, it's not something you ingest, it's something you paint, right? So this is also, when the medicine's taken away, so, which it will, because it'll, get off your face eventually. The person who was almost frantic with love, so this object of your affection, you've liked them for a long time, you do this face paint thing, they're crazy, they're frantic with love, then hates you with a perfect hatred.
So you should get the nap rate.
So don't do it, right? I mean, because people don't like to be duped into love, right? That's okay.
Yeah, that seems like good advice.
Okay, so for a bagger from the Menominee, we'll start with its Menominee name, which I am not going to attempt to pronounce.
And listener, we'll put some recipes in the show notes in case any of these.
Yeah.
So if you want like actual love advice, like buy someone a nice dinner and treat them well. That would be
nice box of chocolates. Stick to the standards. Like
yeah. Flowers and the New Brunswick Archaeology podcast on CD.
Yeah,
this is it. Yeah.
Turn
the bass all the way up.
Yeah, show up at their door wearing one of the New Brunswick Archaeology aprons and nothing else, and hope for the best.
There you go.
Okay. If that
Why
fails,
is your face painted like that?
If that fails, so one of the baggers that Huron Smith documents is its Menominee name means one that looks like little pants with his hands in his pockets, and that is the Dutchman's breeches. And Huron Smith writes that this is one of the most important love charms. A young swain, that's his words. This is all his words. Tries to throw it at his intended and hit her with it. So, he can also chew the root. So again, here's an archaeological problem, right? The root unlikely to preserve. So he can chew the root and breathing it out so that his scent will carry to her. Then he circles around the girl, and when she catches the scent, she will follow him wherever she goes, even against her will. So...
And does this one stick?
What is that?
Does this one stick? Or is this a nap rate?
This is one that they all stick. But I will say something to think about is any kind of magic can be undone, right? So... you could go to a cure and, a healer and get this cured.
Okay.
So I was thinking, like,
that's a relief.
This does sound weird, like throwing a plant at somebody or having the scent kind of charm them into you. But then I was thinking about, like, what would be something familiar to your listeners. And this is actually really similar to mistletoe, right? Where you have, like, mistletoe hung up, and it's like the physicality of the plant, and like when you're under it, like you have to like dangle it and someone has to kiss you. Like, what a weird thing. And it's actually kind of similar, like they hit you with and you're like, oh, fine, you know.
I felt like there was this thing I read like a decade ago that was very concerned that like pheromones were so powerful that like someone could change their underarm deodorant and someone would fall out of love with you. You know, it's just like that visceral experience. I'm not sure if that's real, and I can't remember where I read it.
But don't, I mean, you're a married man. Don't change your
steering
deodorant
away from
now.
facts. I think you're embodying me today, Gabe. That just kind of like that thought bubble.
I would love to be the judge in that divorce hearing. Well, he changed his deodorant, and I just
Mitchum changed the recipe, and it's
yeah. He got rid of the Old Spice high endurance, and it just there was nothing left.
Yeah. Well,
only loving
anyway.
me for my aluminum clogged pores.
So another bagger, wood betony, and the name, the Menominee name actually means woman enticer root.
Okay.
So it's an unsettled name.
You can bleep that if you need to, Emanuel.
So this root is just carried on the person who's contemplating making love advances. So I think here it's working more or less as like a good luck charm.
Yeah.
You know, it might be like putting on your favorite t-shirt or something like that. It just gives you that little extra boost of confidence.
Extra blast of Axe body spray.
And you don't have to use this. You just wear this if you're going to the club and you might feel amorous.
Yeah, I think you would probably do it if you were like planning on asking someone out.
Okay.
You know, for like to the dance or whatever.
Cool.
You might put it in your pocket and like, you know, give you that extra edge over the other guy.
Yeah.
You know. And again, that one doesn't seem to have quite the same pull as some of the others, but I don't know. This is I haven't tried it. Nor will I.
Do we have the third Maddie McLeaster episode?
The follow-up.
Live from Chicago.
I'm at the club.
Yeah.
I've got wood betony in my pocket. Let's see what happens. Let's just have all these men coming after me, like even worse than I'm just like, oh my God. Get away. Okay.
Do women ever use baggers? Are there examples of women using baggers?
Of course. You just want to get to the puppets.
sorry, I'm not rushing you.
I guess the listener might also be wondering, Maddie, you use the club, you invoked a hypothetical situation with the club, but there is some potential for experimental archaeology with this love potion research avenue. And so
I believe I've been quite clear not to do this. I feel like I've said many times.
That's right. Prospective grad students, Maddie is taking on new students to
You have to be single if you want to be one of my girls. True. I can, we could, make some things happen, to make you single.
Yeah. Do you like puppets?
With plants. Exactly, right? With plants, just to be clear. No Title IX situations. Okay. You two seem determined to derail this podcast, but I, despite not being a host, I'm going to try and bring us back.
Okay, all right.
So the other plants you have are plants that work in tandem with other plants. So we mentioned that hazel could be a binder, right? It kind of brings, so each plant might have an individual property. You put hazel in and it makes all those properties work together. And maybe even some emergent property as a result. So Smith notes that ginseng, American ginseng, works as a bagger when activated with other items, specifically mica, gelatin, and snake meat. Can be used by a woman to get a husband.
Okay.
So there you go. And what I found
Snake
interesting is that what'd you say?
Snake meat.
Yeah, I'm hanging on snake meat as well. Like I'm trying to picture.
Really?
Yeah,
people eat snake.
I'm trying to picture the combination, I guess, that you just described.
Well, you would eat it, right? So so it's just like seasoned.
Yeah.
I mean, the mica is the weird ingredient there.
You like a
That's true.
sashimi, probably. You know, like a.
People eat snake.
Huh. How do
You
they
can
prepare?
like buy snake.
Really?
Yeah, that's not the weird. You guys are just. You need to.
Did we go to the same market basket, Maddie? The Concord market basket is different than the one in Manchester.
Trader Joe's snake meat.
Anyway, what I found interesting is ginseng is kind of a Chinese ginseng is kind of a classic aphrodisiac. So it's interesting to see American ginseng kind of carrying some of those same properties to keep us on track.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have moving away from baggers. We have other love medicines.
I like that Maddie was about to pause in between saying that and then saw us start to talk and was like, I don't know.
No, I'm taking over. Your listeners came for love medicines and god damn it, they're gonna get them. Okay. So we have Great Lobelia, which is a plant that you can take the roots and finely chop them and put them in the food of a quarrelsome pair without their knowledge. So you mentioned surreptitious action, Ken, and this would be one. So if your neighbors fight all the time and that's annoying to you, you can sprinkle this in their food and it will make them love each other again. So isn't that
interesting?
A beautiful thing?
Does that last a long time or does it not say? Unclear. Yeah.
It just says again. Yeah, so it might just, be short-lived. But, I mean, you could try it. You could just keep it up, if it doesn't last. Yeah, there isn't a kind of duration aspect of it. So, this would be something that if I were interested in usage that, someone else, you could have on someone else who maybe dives into these more.
Yeah. Start small and work up with the dose and see what happens.
Interestingly, he writes that the eclectic practitioners among the whites, so I'm pretty sure like snake oil salesmen kind of people, use this plant as well as a remedy for syphilis.
Yeah,
so
in your paper,
maybe if you make them love each other too much, or depending why they're quarreling, it might kind of be a twofer.
Well, one of these was in the paper was a cure for, was it gonorrhea?
He passed on that one. I believe it's gonorrhea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's like, it was a simple cure, and he doesn't ask for it. He just points out that it's expensive. And I was like, dude, the people want to know.
Yeah.
It says
sometimes things are expensive because they're worth
it. I think any lover would pay $2 for the cure.
Well, yeah. So another one, what's interesting about this one is the Potawatomi have a similar kind of surreptitious cure for quarreling couples. But this case, it's the seed of purple meadow rue that you can sprinkle into quarreling couples' foods to make them stop quarreling. So
those ones seem more benevolent to me than the baggers. They seem a little less manipulative.
I guess it depends. I mean, it is manipulation.
Yeah. I guess it's just nicer. Yeah. Right.
So
maybe it just postpones the real resolution to their problems.
Yeah.
Puppets.
Puppets. All right, let's go to puppets.
No, we don't have to. We can take this in your order.
We're at puppets.
We're at puppets. Okay.
We're here. All right, so we're going to move away from plants. One of the more interesting things I encountered, and more terrifying things I encountered, was this story collected by Alison Skinner in 1921. He has a little bit of a checkered history with the Menominee. But because he just was, Herman Smith, I think, was ethical for his time. Skinner was not.
And being not ethical for the 1920s anthropology is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. So, but you can use puppets for love medicine. And this is a story that he recounts in 1921. So, a Menominee woman owned a set of two puppets that were bound together. They're tied together face to face, along with a medicinal pouch that contained a powder made from a human heart. The puppets brought its owner 4 husbands. However, their magic was so powerful that each died shortly after marriage. So she decides this puppet thing's not working out. They're too powerful. And she gives them to Alison Skinner.
The late Alison Skinner.
Yes. Well, I mean, he actually does have an untimely death, like Huron Smith. So again, I want to reiterate, don't dabble in love medicine. But anyway, she gives them to, because she wants, she decides they're too potent.
It occurred to that maybe the ground up human heart was going to add a certain oomph that maybe they didn't need.
I don't know.
The old Kalima solution was not called for.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're from what so he collects them for the American Museum of Natural History.
Wow.
And so I do wonder if they are still there, just killing husbands.
Yeah.
Anyway, don't pull those from the collections. My advice.
Yeah. Do we know who got that job?
So anyway, love spells with puppets. To do it, you would need a personal item from the individual. So like a hair, a fingernail, clothing. And again, like we can think of like a voodoo doll is probably the closest idea that your listeners have. The other one I came across that I thought was really lovely is that animals could be invoked to help in love matters. And one,
Not like a white dove.
Yeah, so we think about like white doves. In this case,
I think the rabbit is the other symbol. It's like the fertility thing, right?
I don't know. Anyway, he mentions deer or elk in his. Skinner mentions deer or elk.
I feel like I just revealed something about my personality. Like we all, sorry. So, what did you think of Maddie? Ken and I have both said what we thought of.
Yeah. Nadine has received so many rabbits over the years.
This thing on track. I feel so bad for the person who edits this, just knowing the challenges I'm having keeping you two on track.
And Emanuel doesn't even need this stuff as much as we do.
So anyway, those are my Midwest love potions for your listeners.
That's fantastic. So, but you mentioned, I think that there were some other ones when we were chatting the other day, that there were some beyond the Midwest ones you heard about too.
Yep.
Any greatest hits you'd like to share?
Yeah. So I wanted to point out that like witchcraft is a particular anthropological theme that is one that is like very well studied worldwide. So there's tons of ethnographies on witchcraft, going back, to the early founding of anthropology. So
Witchcraft,
like
you ask? Lovecraft, we answer.
So like E. Evans Pritchard as the kind of iconic Witchcraft Among the Azande book. But what's interesting is, despite the fact that it is such a dominant anthropological theme, a cultural anthropological theme, it doesn't make its way too much into archaeology. And we have, for example, Walker's text, Where Are the Witches? And then we can go from there, where, down to medicinal plants, and that gets more and more narrow. But we can find evidence of it. I like to joke that we have good evidence of sex in the archaeological record, and that we are still here. So that's a good data point. But we can also find brothels fairly easily. That's probably when we think about sex, that's probably so medicinal plants, as we mentioned, very hard to find. Brothels, a little easier. So
will you explain what a brothel is for Ken?
Well, I get my students to read. There's a great historical archaeology paper about the Hookers District in Washington, D.C.,
Is that right?
about like the archaeological patterning around this like brothel, basically, right? And like sort of looking at the patterning around the brothel and a couple of other residential places there. So
neat.
Yeah.
So
what brothel were you thinking of, Maddie?
Well, I can actually bring up a DC example. I was going to start with some early brothels.
Okay.
So like at Pompeii, there are some great examples of brothels. There's 35 brothels in Pompeii.
Wow.
Which dates to the first century.
I've been there. It's not that big of a place for 30.
I know. It's the oldest profession. So how do we identify a brothel, right? So it's going to, as we mentioned earlier, not all. So they do advertise, right? We said
nap
like
rates.
This hotel had nap rates. In the case of Pompeii, right, you have a system of writing. And so there is some graffiti on the wall. It's often erotic. And I think we said I can curse on this podcast.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
this one's getting the E rating anyway.
Yeah.
One of the messages that was on a brothel wall in Pompeii reads, "Here I fucked many girls."
Oh,
subtle.
So it's
yeah. It's
an obvious kind of thing.
Yeah. And is the graffiti the just the classic like shape of a man's phallus painted onto the walls, or is the graffiti like written words?
No, it says, "Here I fucked many girls."
Okay.
Because this sounds like a truck stop more than a brothel to me. But that,
right, and you would have a choice of women. So there are other places where it's kind of a smaller brothel where it's just the one woman.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the nature of the graffiti. So it's not just like penises. It's specific messages of like, she's good. Like a early Google review.
Yeah, I was just gonna say this is like a Google review. 2 stars. The food wasn't great.
So we talked about Washington, D.C., another great example of a brothel. So we can also know brothels from historical records and kind of go the other way. So this way, we talked about like Pompeii. It's kind of, we find a room, it says it's a brothel, right? We find a house, it says it's a brothel. And we can go the other way is using historical records where we know it's a brothel, and then you go in to see kind of what life is like in the brothel. And this was in Washington, D.C. This is from, I can get you the reference.
Excellent, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like I didn't write it down. I meant to, but you can put it in the show notes.
That's good, because if you don't give us the reference, I'm just going to have to put the ones I knew from 2008. So...
So this is a brothel from 1883, and it was Madame Mary Ann Hall's house. And what there is, we're seeing just a really kind of extravagant life. In particular, the consumption of expensive French champagne, which was in William Sanger in his 1858 History of Prostitution, writes that only champagne is served in these in a first class parlor house. So, and we see that hold up archaeologically. So it's not just something that's written. We just see also really nice foods and cuts of meats, lots of vegetables and berries. And right, this is a time when, you can't go to Market Basket and get sneak meat. You have to. So, so when we compare it to the kinds of status of another working class house, it's just dramatically higher. And the women would be, so why would women go into prostitution? Well, she's living a pretty good life, drinking champagne, eating good food. We also see really nice tablewares and things like that. But just to bring it, so that's kind of one set of archaeology that we can find, is these kind of brothels. And then the other one, when we do have historical records, we can find love potions again. So, and we can kind of have a broad definition of love potions. I'll point you to my friend Tate Paulette's book on the land of Ninkasi, I believe, which is dealing with alcohol in Mesopotamia. So some of our earliest writing is talking about, the ways that alcohol works as an aphrodisiac.
But only the best champagnes.
Yes. Yeah.
And well, that time it's beer. They're not quite
I see.
yet. The French,
Yeah.
you gotta move a couple thousand years
Okay.
before we get to the specific turning of the bottle.
Yeah,
of
sorry,
champagne.
just going back to the DC thing with the brothels. So what you were talking about is so this article that I was talking about by Donna Seifert is Within Sight of the White House, the Archaeology of Working Women. And one of the points that they make is that the prostitutes working in the brothel actually had access to higher quality goods. They had better clothing. They had their own income. It was one of the few professions that they could have sort of an independent income. And they compared it to working class households and women's material from those working class households. And it was basically the women working in the brothel just had access to a better quality everything because they had sort of an independence that didn't exist for working class women.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a trade-off, right? But maybe it's probably the same author, if not the same article. I mean, how many people are doing prostitution in DC?
I mean, how many people are
Archaeology?
Yeah, I don't
studying
know.
prostitution in DC?
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, there's a big overlap there, depending on how we want to define studying, right?
Right.
Good prostitutes do their homework, Gabe.
Yeah. So,
The archaeology.
yeah.
All right, so
Yeah.
I will leave you with, kind of two other, deeper time where we have historical records, right? One, so we have Mesopotamia already, just alcohol, the way that works as an aphrodisiac, still used today, right? Go out for a drink with somebody, chat them up.
And
But
occasionally you get the effects of good magic becoming dark magic the next day. That's the
you're like, what did I do? So
Ken, would
many
you like to unpack that?
No, that's for another show.
I find it interesting how much you two feel the need to reveal. I'm sticking with the content of my notes. But okay. So here again, we need to understand, when we go back to medicinal plants, we need those historical records to contextualize them. And so where we have early historical records, specifically from like the Mediterranean, love potions do pop up. And so the first half of the first millennium CE, in Roman Egypt, we find spells written by a magician that would then be transcribed and sold by scribes to adapt them to their clients' needs. And we see spells being used by men and spells being used by women. So I thought I would just end with a spell.
Okay.
All right.
Do we close our eyes?
Emanuel, this is we're probably going to get sued for it, but I put a spell on you should be playing in the background, right?
Just loop like whatever 10-second clip you're allowed to use for free.
Yes, exactly.
So this is from a book by Dickey, 2000. I'll just leave that there.
Wait, so if the listener is traveling with someone should they be aware of who they're in the car with? Is this or just a surprise?
Yeah, no, let it go. Because it has to. You have to adapt it. So we're reading just the purest version of it. So this is the spell that you can adapt to your own needs. All right. So this is a 4th century binding spell from Egypt. Take a clean sheet of paper and write the following names and inscribe the following figure using the blood of an ass, and throw on it something that belongs to the woman you want. As you burn and are consumed with fire, let the same thing happen to the heart and soul of such and such. a woman whom so-and-so bore until she comes in love to me being so-and-so, that she may join her female parts to my parts.
Aww.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, listener.
Well, Maddie, thank you very much for that. Happy Valentine's Day, Maddie. And from our podcast to the world, happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maddie. Happy Valentine's Day.
You're welcome.
Featuring Gabe Reinick and Ken Holyoke. The New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast.